My wife was 7 months pregnant, burning with a 103-degree fever, when the HOA president kicked her out of a hospital bed. She said Silverleaf Estates doesn't tolerate misuse of emergency facilities. 30 minutes later, she stood in front of the whole neighborhood, humiliated and stripped of her title. But before that moment came, I learned what real power abuse looks like and what happens when you push the wrong man too far. My name's Nathan Calver. I'm a systems engineer. I design fail-safe networks for hospitals. My job is to keep trauma wings alive during blackouts, make sure every alarm, every backup generator, every life support system does its job when chaos hits. Funny how, despite all that, I couldn't protect my own wife from a woman with a clipboard. Laya, my wife, was 7 months along high-risk pregnancy, constant fatigue, faint spells. She spent most evenings sitting on the old porch swing my dad built by hand. He was a disabled veteran. That swing was the only thing left of him, the one piece of family history still holding us together. And that's where the HOA started. The letter came first, $3,000 fine for unauthorized medical equipment. They meant the fetal monitor I'd installed for Leia, a small portable unit wired to my laptop just until the clinic upgraded their system. Meredith Langford, the HOA president, dropped the fine off herself while my wife was outside the car throwing up. I'll never forget the way Meredith stood there in her pressed white slacks, pearls gleaming in the sun, saying, "You're cluttering the neighborhood with medical junk." That was her phrase, medical junk. That night, Laya collapsed in the hallway. I drove like hell to Memorial General, praying the monitor hadn't missed something. We barely made it through the ER doors before she started drifting in and out. A nurse was helping her into a bed when Meredith showed up, heels clicking on the tile like she owned the place. She told security she was a compliance officer from Silverleaf Estates, that we'd misused medical equipment on HOA property. The nurse froze. Meredith said Laya wasn't authorized to be in that bed. Authorized. Like compassion needed permission. I told her as calmly as I could that I designed the very system that hospital used to triage patients, that the bed she was standing next to was online because of me. She smirked. "Designers don't get privileges, Mr. Calver. Rules do." I wanted to shout, but then the heart monitor beeped. Leia's temperature was climbing past 103.7. The nurse looked ready to cry. The ER director poked his head out, then ducked back in. Meredith had that kind of power, the kind that made people doubt their own conscience. We were escorted out. My wife was shaking, drenched in sweat. I carried her back to the car, trying to stay composed while inside every part of me was breaking. When we got home, there was another notice taped to the door. Same red-bordered paper, same signature, same HOA seal. It had been time-stamped 20 minutes before she collapsed. Meredith had already filed the violation, like she was waiting for us to fail. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with one hand on Laya's pulse and the other scrolling through the HOA's online portal. I hacked in deeper than residents were supposed to go. What I found made my blood run cold. 17 Category C violations for medical or health-related issues in the past 8 months. Every single one was issued to families with a pregnant woman, an elderly parent, or someone disabled. Not one went to a healthy single resident. It wasn't about safety. It was about control, about targeting the vulnerable. I should have gone to the police. I should have called a lawyer. But at 2 in the morning, staring at those records, I thought, maybe this is just how things are. Maybe I'm overreacting. HOA rules are supposed to keep order right. I'd spent years working with bureaucracies. Maybe I was the problem, too stubborn, too emotional. That's what Meredith wanted me to believe. And for a few hours I almost did. Until the next morning, when a certified letter arrived accusing us of non-disclosure of an infectious condition during a community event. They claimed Leia had endangered the neighborhood at a Memorial Day barbecue. She hadn't even been sick then. That's when it clicked. She didn't just want compliance. She wanted our house. The porch swing, the history, all of it. I went outside for air, and that's when I saw her Lexus parked across the street. Engine off, windows up, just sitting there like a predator in tall grass. Meredith didn't even get out. She didn't have to. Message received. But later that day, something changed. When I stepped onto the porch, there was a yellow ribbon tied to the swing. Underneath it, a note. "She's gone too far." No signature, but I knew who it came from. Jerome Beck, the HOA secretary. Quiet man, mid-50s, always carrying a clipboard. He'd always looked uneasy during meetings, like a soldier following orders he didn't believe in. That night, I pulled up the community's infrastructure map. I'd helped design part of the city's emergency zoning system 2 years earlier, and the files were still archived on my drive. What I found flipped the game completely. Our house sat on a federally protected emergency triage corridor, an easement zone meant to guarantee ambulance access during disasters. That meant any attempt to block or penalize us for having medical equipment wasn't just immoral, it was illegal. If she evicted us, she'd be obstructing a federal health route. By sunrise, I had a full report, schematics, timestamps, violation records. I sent copies to a civil rights attorney and the county zoning office. The attorney wrote back 3 hours later, "Your HOA is in violation of federal easement law." That same day, the HOA announced an emergency vote. Meredith was pushing a new clause that would let the board deny occupancy to households posing medical risks. She was turning her vendetta into legislation. I was exhausted, angry, and honestly scared. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Laya's pale face under that heat lamp shivering in the ER hallway. I started wondering if fighting back was even worth it. What if it made things worse? What if they came for us again, and next time I couldn't protect her? But then she woke up that morning weak but lucid and asked softly, "Did they back off?" I told her no. They escalated. She just smiled, faintly squeezed my hand and said, "Then you can't stop." That was it. The moment I knew I couldn't walk away. Jerome contacted me a day later. He handed me an envelope. Inside were internal emails, meeting minutes, and one quote circled in red: "Eviction is cleaner than leniency." Meredith's words. She'd said it 2 days after the hospital incident. Jerome looked wrecked. "She threatened to strip my position if I didn't vote yes on the bylaw," he said quietly. "I used to be an EMT. I knew your wife was critical. I still stayed silent. I told him you don't have to anymore." He reached into his pocket, handed me a USB drive and said, "Everything she's hiding is on there. Use it." So I did. I built a website that night, silverleaftruth.org. The homepage had one question. If your wife were 7 months pregnant and your HOA kicked her out of the ER, what would you do? Beneath that was a single clip, Meredith's own voice saying, "Pregnancy is not a protected medical exemption under HOA policy." I embedded the full report and scheduled an email blast to every resident local reporter and legal office in the county. The timing was everything. It would go live at exactly 6 p.m., the start of the HOA's emergency meeting. I also printed flyers, 27 of them, with a QR code linking to the site. Each one said, "If they can do this to us, they can do it to you." I dropped them in mailboxes at dawn. Then I sat beside Laya on the porch swing as the sun rose. She leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "I'm scared." I told her, "So am I. But fear's how they win. And I'm done losing." By evening, the clubhouse parking lot was packed. Meredith's Lexus gleamed by the entrance like a trophy. Inside, residents sat in rows, fanning themselves with printed agendas. Meredith stood at the podium, pearls glowing under the fluorescent lights. "Before we begin," she said, "I'd like to address a malicious smear campaign circulating online." She didn't get to finish. I turned on my portable projector. A bright light hit the wall behind her. Then came her voice, cold and clear. "Pregnancy is not a protected medical exemption." The room froze. You could hear people's chairs creak as they turned. Meredith's face drained of color. I stepped forward. "This," I said, "is your president. The same woman who filed a complaint that forced hospital staff to move my pregnant wife out of a monitored bed." Meredith's jaw clenched. "Mr. Calver, this is highly inappropriate." "No," I said. "What's inappropriate is falsifying a lien while my wife was unconscious. What's illegal is trying to evict a family living on a federally protected medical corridor." Someone in the audience stood up. "Is that true?" Jerome rose behind me holding a folder. It is. I recorded the meeting. Every word. The room buzzed with whispers. Meredith tried to regain control. This is a distortion. Then the back doors opened and Leah walked in, wrapped in a light shawl, pale but standing tall. The crowd went silent. She looked straight at Meredith. I was the woman in that hospital bed, she said. You filed a complaint that got me removed while I had a 103-degree fever. I wasn't contagious. I was pregnant. Her voice trembled. You thought protecting your reputation was more important than protecting a life. You could feel the shift in the air. Heads turned toward the board table. Meredith reached for her notes, but her hands were shaking. A man stepped forward from the back. Ronald Dempsey, County Zoning Inspector, he said, holding up his badge. After reviewing the submitted evidence, I'm issuing a formal suspension of the HOA's enforcement authority pending investigation. The room erupted applause, shouting disbelief. Someone yelled, "Revote the board." Others joined in. "Revote. Revote." Meredith tried to speak, but her voice cracked. This is a coup. You're being manipulated by a man who broke the rules. I looked her dead in the eye. I followed every rule. You broke them. A resident raised his hand. Motion to remove Meredith Langford from her seat as HOA president. Seconded came another voice. Jerome stepped forward. Let the record show the motion carries sufficient support for an immediate vote under Section 3.1. Meredith turned toward the exit, but two board members, her own allies, stood and blocked her path. She just stared, realizing the room she'd ruled through fear no longer belonged to her. For the first time, she looked small. The meeting adjourned with unanimous votes. Meredith Langford was no longer president of anything. I didn't celebrate. There were no high fives, no smiles, just a strange, heavy quiet as people walked out murmuring to each other like waking from a long sleep. The next morning I sat on the porch swing with Leah. The sun was warm, the air heavy with humidity, but for once it didn't feel suffocating. Workers came by and unbolted the old HOA sign from the clubhouse wall. No speeches, no ceremony, just two men with wrenches dismantling the symbol of her power. Later a small package showed up on our porch. Inside was a wooden plaque, hand-carved. It read, "Here we made them listen." I hung it right above the swing. The same swing my father built, the same one Meredith tried to label non-conforming. It creaked in the wind, soft and steady. And I realized something. This was never about fines or rules or even power. It was about dignity, the kind you have to fight for when the system forgets your humanity. When rules become weapons, silence is surrender.